Good to have you with us. This is ARIRANG News, live from Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin with the latest coming out of the presidential office. President Park Geun-hye has named and replaced new ministers, plus the head of the country's financial regulator. As for a highly anticipated appointment for presidential chief of staff, she will wait until after this week's Lunar New Year holiday. Now, that said, let's now connect to ARIRANG News' presidential office correspondent Choi You-sun for more. So, You-sun, let's first talk about the cabinet reshuffle today. It was a rather small-scale reshuffle as expected.
Right, Hyun-kyung, as had been expected in recent weeks, President Park filled the seat of Oceans Minister, which has been vacant since former Minister Lee Ju-young stepped down late last year. She has tapped third-term ruling party lawmaker Yoo Ki-jun as her new Oceans Minister. Yoo is close to the president and had practiced maritime law in the past. A surprise pick today was the president's new Unification Minister. In a likely move to select a figure who's been involved in her policy-making process, she chose her current Unification Secretary Hong Yong-pyo to head the Unification Ministry. Hong had not been one of the candidates mentioned for the post. President Park also replaced her transport minister. She named another ruling party lawmaker considered a member of her faction, Yoo Il-ho, who's also an economist. That's two more lawmakers named to the cabinet, and if they both get parliamentary approval, President Park will have lawmakers and politicians taking up a third of her cabinet. For the Financial Services Commission chairman, the president tapped Im Jong-yong, a former vice finance minister who also headed a private financial group. With his experience in both public and private sectors, Im is known to understand the shortcomings of the current financial system and will likely push for a bold deregulation drive. Hyun-kyung?
Okay, so about the presidential chief of staff, so it's now confirmed that the current chief of staff, Kim Ki-chun, will step down, but it looks like the president will take more time with choosing his successor.
Right. The presidential office has confirmed President Park accepted her chief of staff's offer to step down. Kim Ki-chun's successor, however, was not announced today. Neither were the president's special political advisors to bolster communication. The president is thought to be giving more consideration to her choices after her pick for prime minister failed to win full parliamentary and public support. In order to push ahead with her economic reform drive, President Park, by reorganizing the presidential office, needs to show she has revamped her administration, which was at the center of a scandal surrounding leaked documents. I'm Choi You-sun reporting on President Park's latest cabinet reshuffle.
All right, many thanks there, You-sun, for that report. Now, in other news, today is the one-year anniversary of the UN Commission of Inquiry's lengthy and very detailed report on North Korea's human rights violations. Although it may not yet have done much to improve the situation in the North, what it has done for sure is build immense pressure on the regime. ARIRANG News' Hwang Sung-hee has the story.
The UN's Commission of Inquiry launched its first-ever investigation into North Korea's dire human rights situation in the summer of 2013. The three-member panel met with North Korean defectors and experts in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington to hear testimonies and collect data.
Forced abortions, trafficking, and other indignities imposed upon women, both as prisoners.
The outcome was a landmark 370-page report published last February that outlined North Korea's human rights abuses, including torture, execution and arbitrary imprisonment, deliberate starvation, and rape. It recommended that the regime be referred to the International Criminal Court for possible prosecution of leader Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang's initial reaction was anger, even threatening a nuclear war.
It is necessary to strongly react to the hostile forces attempting to meddle in the internal affairs of other countries under the signboard of human rights.
Then North Korea countered with a different tactic, publishing its own lengthy report on its human rights conditions and releasing American detainees. But all this was to no avail. The UN General Assembly approved a resolution on North Korean human rights, and the UN Security Council held its first-ever discussion on the issue in December. While any referral to the ICC would almost certainly be vetoed by permanent UN Security Council members China and Russia, Seoul is set to open a UN Human Rights Office next month. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
And in other parts of the world, Egypt has launched a second wave of airstrikes on Islamic State targets in Libya. These are in response to the mass beheading of 21 Egyptian Christians by those loyal to the extremist group. Now, Cairo is rallying more concerted international efforts toward destroying the group's operations. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Anger erupted in Egypt one day after the Islamic State militant group released a gruesome video showing the beheading of 21 Egyptian Christians. That rage rained down on IS-controlled areas in Libya, where the decapitations are believed to have taken place. Egyptian state television aired footage of fighter jets departing a hangar. The words "Long live Egypt" can be seen written on a jet's tail as it sets off on its mission. This was followed by night vision aerial footage showing airstrikes destroying reported IS camps, training sites, and weapons storage areas.
Of course, what happened is a barbaric and savage terrorist act that goes back to the Stone Age. I can't imagine who would do that. Egypt has every right to defend itself, and it must take steps against this type of terrorism carried out by those fundamentalists.
While the bombings were taking place, some of the victims' families held a funeral service for their loved ones in El Or village of Samalut, though their bodies presumably remain in Libya. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah Sisi is calling on the international community to expand its fight against the IS group beyond its strongholds in Iraq and Syria to include Libya. He says the situation in Libya is a clear threat to world peace and security. The UN Security Council and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned the mass murder as heinous and cowardly. Pope Francis, in his Monday address, urged Catholics to remember their brothers who died for the mere fact of confessing Christ. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And over in Denmark, tens of thousands came together in remembrance for the victims of the weekend's twin terror attacks. An estimated 40,000 people flocked to vigils across Copenhagen, where flowers were laid and candles lit in the colors of a nation that prides itself on its safety record. Denmark's prime minister pledged to remain strong and not be intimidated by extremist attacks on free speech and other liberties. As for the latest on the gunman investigation, he is identified by local media as 22-year-old Omar al-Hussein. Authorities believe he may have been radicalized while he was in prison for a violent knife attack. Now, he was born and raised in Denmark and is not believed to be a part of a wider terror group. Doubts over Greece's €240 billion bailout package have been renewed. Negotiations between Greece and its creditors have fallen through for now. Athens is firm that it will no longer deal with any further austerity measures, while the group of Eurozone finance ministers says otherwise. Song Ji-sun has this story.
Talks between Greece and Eurozone finance ministers over Athens' debt crisis broke down on Monday after Greece rejected a proposal for a 6-month extension of its international bailout package, calling it unacceptable. Eurozone ministers handed Greece an ultimatum on Monday to request an extension to its debt bailout program with the conditions unchanged.
Within that program, a lot of changes are possible. There is flexibility, but the main features of the program, keeping the budget on track, reforming the economy, have to be maintained. But the first step would be an extension, and then the second step is let's talk about the content of the program, but not the other way around.
The Eurogroup added the talks will not resume unless Athens submits an extension request by Friday. Greece is seeking to overhaul the terms of the $270 billion bailout package that comes attached with strong austerity measures.
And let's find common ground between the two. This is what we've been saying from the beginning. It's not a bluff, because it's the only option we have. It's plan A, there is no plan B.
Greece reaffirmed that it intends to stay within the Eurozone and that it's optimistic the two sides can reach an agreement before the package expires. The program ends on the last day of February, and if it does, Greece's coffers will likely run dry. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, the entire nation is getting ready for the 3-day-long Lunar New Year holiday today, but the holiday begins tomorrow, and the tradition is to exchange gifts with family and friends, but most Koreans tend to mail them in advance, meaning this is one of the busiest times of the year for the nation's delivery workers. Shin Se-min reports.
'Tis the season. The postal service in Korea gets flooded with packages filled with items like fresh fruit, meat, health products, and other popular seasonal gifts. They will be shipped to cities and towns across the country ahead of Lunar New Year's Day.
Piles of packages. Over 500,000 parcels are being checked in and out of this distribution center every day, at least during this time of the year. The amount? Nearly double the usual, forcing the Postal Service to expand its manpower by 10% for the holiday rush.
While there is definitely gratitude owed to the senders of these items, the backbreaking work of local postal and delivery service people should not be forgotten.
예, 안녕하세요. 택배 기사인데요. 예, 알겠습니다. 지금 올라갈게요. 택배요.
Lee Chung-hee has been delivering some 300 boxes a day, trying to keep up with the rush of packages. His days have gotten longer and his nights of rest much shorter.
I don't really look forward to the holidays. I used to like them, but being in this profession has changed my perspective. Now, I personally hand-deliver gifts to my relatives.
Despite the drawbacks, Lee still gives 110% to his work.
It's a little nerve-wracking. I have to be careful that I don't lose or mishandle any of the packages, especially because I know they're gift boxes.
And thanks to Lee and others like him in the delivery service, hundreds of thousands of people across the country will be able to share and enjoy an even happier holiday this year. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And this upcoming holiday is also one of the busiest times for those working in the tourism-related sector as they gear up to greet the Chinese visitors pouring into the nation. But there are concerns that this trend might burn out pretty fast, especially if the quality of tourism service continues to leave some visitors cold. Kwon So-ah tells us more.
It's that time of the year again, when a single country's visitors to Korea bring about happy smiles to the nation's economy. It's Chinese tourists who are flocking in again for this Lunar New Year's holiday season, the biggest in China, beginning on Wednesday. This year's number of visitors to Korea during the one-week period is expected to reach around 120,000, a 30% fold jump from last year. Visits are on a steady rise, with a total of 7.2 million Chinese expected to come over this year. It's welcoming news for the sluggish domestic economy, as shopping tops the to-do list for the average Chinese tourist.
I bought a lot of cosmetics, shoes, and clothes.
Experts say this year looks especially promising.
Chinese tourists are estimated to bring Korea around $180 million from direct consumption just during the Chinese New Year holiday season, and that figure will probably top $630 million for all of February.
But not everyone is satisfied with everything they experience on their trip.
I had no problems with communication or accommodations, but I did have problems trying to receive after-service for something I bought here last year.
A recent study shows that Chinese tourists complained the most about having troubles with communicating during their visit. Second and third on the list were unsatisfactory food and high costs. This is why experts say there needs to be a bigger focus on high-quality tourism rather than quantity, so that the Chinese visitors do not call their trips to Korea a one-time experience. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And on the nation's economic front, the Bank of Korea has decided to keep its key interest rate steady at 2%. This was a widely expected move, but what's also widely expected at this point is another rate cut at sometime in the first half of the year, as scores of countries around the world continue to loosen their monetary policies. ARIRANG News' Hwang Ji-hye has the story.
The Bank of Korea has decided to stand pat on its key interest rate of 2% for the fourth straight month in February. The rate freeze that came on Tuesday right before the Lunar New Year holiday gives the central bank more time to gauge the impact of two previous rate cuts in August and October last year. Those cuts, which came in line with government efforts to prop up the ailing domestic economy, left the country's base rate at an historic low not seen since the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. Still, market expectations are growing for another rate cut in the first half of this year. They're being driven by a wave of global monetary easing that countries like China, India, and Australia are engaged in, along with weak economic sentiment at home despite aggressive government stimulus measures. Low inflation also leaves room for more monetary easing. But lowering the key rate stokes concerns about the country's snowballing household debt that already exceeds $900 billion. The government's deregulation drive in the housing sector and a lower key interest rate have worked together to boost housing loans. Korea's Finance Minister Choi You-sun also emphasizes the importance of implementing structural reforms. As top central banker Lee Ju-yeol says, the current 2% rate is sufficient to support the country's recovery momentum. Hong Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Korea's producer prices fell for the sixth straight month in January to their lowest level in more than 4 years. The central bank says last month's producer price index slipped 1.2% from December. That's the lowest level recorded since November 2010. Compared to the same period last year, producer prices tumbled 3.6%, posting the sharpest annual decline since mid-2009. The central bank attributed the continuing drop to falling global oil prices.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Korea's southern port city of Busan has blossomed into one of the country's best culture and tourism hubs over the years. But some in the city are raising concerns that the shine may have started to wear off a little. ARIRANG News' Ji Myung-gil sat down with a legislator from the city to find out what needs to be done. Take a look.
Busan, probably known for its annual Film Festival and the G-Star Global Game Exhibition, is striving to become a global city. What more does it need to do, and what other investments need to be made in order to make it a competitive global city?
I believe Busan can gain competitiveness on the global stage by expanding the convention industry and revitalizing the economy of the western part of Busan, which is lagging behind in development compared to the eastern part of the city.
Busan wants to build a new airport and is currently bidding for the 2028 Summer Olympics, which is all part of the future vision for the city. All of these projects will require a significant investment. What do you think about the values of all the projects in relation to the size of the investment?
Focusing on external development is important with the Olympics, as you mentioned, but I believe working toward internal stability is also important. Busan is facing problems such as elderly poverty and increasing suicide rates, both of which are far above the national average. There need to be policies that can help boost quality of life for the citizens of Busan.
In fact, all these problems could apply to other cities in Korea too. How do we move away from metropolitan development and toward balanced regional development?
Busan is barely keeping its title as Korea's second largest metropolis after Seoul. Cities like Busan need to encourage balanced regional development to ensure national competitiveness. National policies should be oriented towards helping people who live in provincial cities to establish a firm footing in their hometowns.
As a member of the Parliamentary Committee for Education, Culture, Sports and Tourism, what are you hoping to achieve this year?
In order to keep Busan from slipping into decline, I think we need to make education the top priority. Many of Busan's young students are leaving to go to universities in Seoul because they feel a gap in educational opportunities. I think my duty is to narrow the gap with the capital region.
Thank you, lawmaker, for speaking with us today.
고맙습니다. All right, that was our ARIRANG News' Ji Myung-gil having an interview with the lawmaker from Busan. Now, moving on, 2014 was an eventful year for Korea, from the reunions for families separated by war to the tragic sinking of the Seoul ferry. The Korea Press Photographers Association has put together an exhibition offering a glimpse at some of these events in pictures. Our Im Yoon-hee has the preview.
As the Lunar New Year brings the start of a new chapter for many, it also closes the door to 2014. A year of trials and tribulations, and an unfathomable calamity that touched the millions of lives on the peninsula. 2014 also held once-in-a-lifetime reunions for families forcibly separated by the war. A reunion that for many will be the last. Snapshots of the most momentous events of 2014 were rounded up for the 51st annual Korea Press Photo Exhibition, revealing a truly unforgettable year.
2014 was plagued with major accidents, in particular the Seoul ferry accident. Korea was traumatized, so the Pope's visit came at a much-needed time, bringing healing to the nation. This exhibition highlights the Pope and his visit with a special section, but also included is an overview of the year and some of the keywords we saw each month.
After the disaster, the nation was left in shock. Tears still shed over many wounds. As a result, people found themselves often on the edge, or even in the middle of a disagreement. But with time and a strong will, the people pushed onward, so that the flower could bloom once again, and the hope of a nation can continue to glow. And the chance to share the experience is only possible due to those on the front line, those whose own tears, sweat, and hard work captured each moment. Photographers are always on the scene, no matter which scene it may be. They must endure the forces of nature and the forces of humanity, all with an air of neutrality, so that of the thousands of pictures that they take, they can share that one special frame with the public.
This is North Korea's fighter Jang Eun-hye, and this blue glove belongs to China's Lee Chi-an. While taking the picture during the 2014 Asian Games, I thought for sure North Korea was going to lose. But in the end, the judge held up Jang Eun-hye's hand and declared her the winner. There's a saying in photography, no ceremonial gestures, and what that means is that as a photographer, you have to detach yourself from the scene and remain neutral in order to catch the exact moment. This picture proves just that.
2014 overflowed with moments that will live on in history. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but it's also worth 1,000 memories, the memories of a country and of its people. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It's been snowing for the last couple of hours, and which has cleared for most parts now, primarily here in the central region. But it's just a few light flurries, so you won't be needing an umbrella. Temperatures will be on the mild side today and above the seasonal averages, but it's also quite windy as well, and it feels about 4 degrees lower than the actual reading. So dress warm so that you don't get sick over the long holiday weekend. The sky will be gray throughout the day and there will be snow in some places. The east coastal regions can expect heavy snowfall and the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province will see up to 15 centimeters until tonight, so make sure to take care driving home. Now let's have a look at the readings for today. Seoul will peak up to 6 this afternoon, while Gwangju and Busan will top to 7 and 11 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju-hwanan gets up to 9, Dokdo hits down to 6, while Mankungang is at -4 and it's snowing. Well, that's all for me at this hour. I'm Michelle Park and I hope you have a wonderful day.
And that's a wrap from us at this hour. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time.